Hello, and thank you for joining us. The Southeast Mental Health Technology Transfer Center is pleased to present today's webinar event, Burnout Reduction, Enhanced Awareness, Tools, Handouts, and Education, or BREATHE. This is Module 1 of 3, entitled Reminding Ourselves to Breathe in Our Work. My name is Emily Moore, and joining me in moderating today's event is Dr. Benjamin Druss, Director of the Southeast Mental Health Technology Transfer Center. Before beginning, I would like to take a brief moment to describe the work of our center, followed by an introduction of today's speaker by Dr. Druss. Please note that our work is supported by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA, and our center and the larger MHTTC network use affirming, respectful, and recovery-oriented language in all activities. The Southeast Mental Health Technology Transfer Center is located in Atlanta, Georgia, at Emory University's Rollins School of Public Health. We are proud to serve the 8 states in HHS Region 4. Our expertise in public health programs, systems, research, and evaluation provides a unique lens through which we can address mental health priorities. We encourage you to visit the Southeast MHTTC website to learn more about our center and upcoming events. I'd now like to turn it over to Dr. Druss so that he can present today's speaker.
Thanks, Emily. So it's really our pleasure to have with us today Michelle Salyers, who's a professor of psychology at Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis. She directs the Assertive Community Treatment Center of Indiana, a collaboration of academic and community partners, including researchers, administrators, clinicians, consumers, and family members who share an interest in recovery-oriented, evidence-based practices. The overarching goal of her work is to help adults with severe mental illness live meaningful lives in the community. Her research addresses both consumers of mental health services and providers of those services. She's increasingly targeting the interaction of consumers and providers, looking for the best ways to support relationships that promote recovery and well-being. Her current work involves developing effective ways to reduce staff burnout and to increase shared decision-making in mental health care. With that, Michelle, I'll turn it over to you. We're really looking forward to your talk.
Great. Thank you very much. I am delighted to be here. And normally I do these as more of an interactive kind of presentation. And so I would like if you guys would open your chats and just let me know where you are, where you're coming from. And I am sitting in our spare bedroom in Indianapolis. So I have this nice serene background so that it's much more relaxing than the spare bedroom. Wow, so it's not just the Southeast, a lot of people from different places. Wow, fun to see everyone. Great. Well, I'll go ahead and share my screen and see if I can get this into the slideshow. Okay, hopefully everyone can see the slideshow. Before I get started, I do like to acknowledge that this work that I have been doing really is not possible without a whole bunch of partners that I've worked with through the years. And you may recognize many of these names. Gary Morse, for example, has done a lot of work with burnout and SAMHSA funded studies and housing and ACT, assertive community treatment. So there's a lot of different people who've been involved in my work. And our plan for today, I'll do a little bit of background on how I came to this work and talk a little bit about how we define burnout and well-being at work. We'll also talk a little bit about the framework that we use and some principles in self-care and well-being at work. And today we'll focus on some specific strategies, and we call these our cornerstone contemplative strategies. And then next week, we'll focus on managing our workload, and the week after that, connecting with our colleagues. And we will be taking some time to reflect and write a little bit. So if you can have some paper handy and a pen or pencil, or if you like to type, you can do that too. And I also like people to give yourself permission to be totally present. So we have to do this on technology, but if you can disconnect from your other technology, like your cell phone, text messages, things like that, for the hour, to give yourself that permission to focus on your own well-being while we're together. And I'd like you to try to be open to new things or trying things in a new way. So some of the things I'll talk about today are things you already know. You might be doing these things with your clients or other people that you work with, but we might be talking about them in different ways. So just trying to be open and try new things. And if you're not in the right place now, so for example, we're going to do some relaxation and breathing exercises later. If you're in a public place, you probably don't want to be doing that. But if you're in a quiet place, you can practice along with us. And if not, you can try it home later. So I want to let you give yourself permission to do those things. So a little bit on my background. I am trained as a clinical psychologist, but I've focused most of my work in academia. So I've done a lot of research on people with severe mental illness, and also focusing on clinicians, case managers, the people who work with people with severe mental illness. So for a long time, we had a technical assistance center where we did a lot of training on assertive community treatment and different evidence-based practices to really help community mental health centers in our state and then in other places as well. And through that work, we did a lot of training and consultation and got to meet a lot of mental health workers. And so, as you know, people come to this field because we want to help others. And our mental health workers play very important roles when we work with people with severe mental illness. We often have people who come into the field maybe with a bachelor's degree, sometimes without college education. They have very important roles for people and they have a lot of responsibility, but often they have low pay and little autonomy in their work. And we also saw a lot of high pressure for productivity, so trying to get those billing hours in. And so your expectations to come into this field to help people, and then you're spending so much of your time frustrated, and it leaves people feeling like this. And so that led us to start thinking about burnout. And all of us have our own definition of what burnout might be. And I guess I can't use the chat function necessarily while I'm sharing my screen, I think. Well, if you would think about, when you think of the term burnout, what does that mean to you? What does that look like? I think for many of us, the first thing we think about is just being exhausted and overwhelmed. And emotional exhaustion is a key aspect of burnout. But that alone is not burnout. We actually think about two other areas. One is this sense of depersonalization, and that is when you feel disconnected from other people, you become cynical. So you treat people that you work with as objects. You might have negative feelings towards them. And the third area is this sense of diminished accomplishment at work, that you're no longer effective at what you're doing, or you no longer feel effective at what you're doing. And this construct of burnout comes from Christina Maslach's work. And she started in the area of human services, that people who work with other people often have this syndrome that comes together. And so that's what burnout is. So I'd like you to think about your own level of burnout. And if you have your pad of paper, you might write down on a scale from 1 with no burnout to 100, where you're extremely burned out, what is your own current level of burnout? And what would you like your burnout to be, say, in 6 months? And I think, Stephanie, I have a poll here. I wanted to get people to weigh in on how much they are currently feeling burned out. So just do the first poll right now, and we'll do the second one later. Oh, I think we have to do both at the same time. Okay. Well, we could pick one for the second one. Sorry, the poll is coming up on my screen and I realized we have to do both at the same time. Stephanie, can you share back the poll numbers after it's done? Okay. Wow, so some of you are feeling no burnout or very little. Most of us are in that moderate to high range, and a few of us are in the very high range. That's interesting. So we'll get to the trigger parts later, but thinking about our burnout, it can be a variable thing. But if you find yourself having high levels of burnout over time, then that can be difficult and comes with a lot of different associated problems. For the individual, the person who's experiencing burnout, you may have poor physical health, you might have trouble sleeping. The research has shown that people who have high levels of burnout tend to have more physical health symptoms. We also tend to use substances more. So having that extra glass of wine in the evening or trying to relax after work, people with high levels of burnout tend to drink more. They also have more depression and mental health concerns. For the organization, burnout leads to problems of being dissatisfied with your work, being more likely to be absent from your work, and turnover. And we know in the mental health field, we do have high levels of turnover. And for the people we serve, so the clients we serve, burnout is associated with reduced satisfaction and quality of care. A lot of the quality of care studies have been done in nursing and medical fields, and we did a meta-analysis of that not too long ago. But there are also quite a few studies in the mental health field showing similar relationships. In our work with burnout, we use this model of job demands and resources, and all of our jobs come with different demands, which we might perceive as challenges, like having a high workload, or emotional labor, which is the concept of having to make your emotions match the situation. So putting on a happy face to serve your customers when you might not be feeling happy, or conversely, a client may be experiencing grief and you have to match your emotion with them. And that can be very challenging in the kind of work we do. We also might have conflict in our work or other kinds of demands, and those tend to lead to increases in burnout. All of our jobs have some level of resources in them, and our job resources tend to reduce burnout and increase our engagement in work. And so if you have a lot of clarity around your roles, what's expected of you, if you have some autonomy, you've got flexibility, you can do more, you have opportunities for growth and feedback, that tends to make people feel less burned out and more engaged in their work. And we all come to this work with our own personal resources. So We all manage our emotions differently. We have different time management strategies. We think about things differently. We may or may not be exercising enough, things like that. And all of this is embedded within an organizational social context. And so the organization we work with may have different policies related to family leave. They might have different levels of support for talking about your mental health, your level of burnout. And so really the organization plays a key role. But as a psychologist, we kind of focus on the personal resources aspect and what can we do to help individuals. So that's where a lot of my work focuses. And our work is BREATHE. So as a good researcher, you have to have a great acronym first. And so the title is kind of clunky, but the acronym works well for us. And that's our BREATHE. And we first tried this out. Gary Morse and Angie Rollins and I were the first group together where we presented for a pilot study at a large mental health center here in Indianapolis. And we opened it to all employees. So not just the mental health workers, but the people who worked at the desks and administrators and things like that. We did a day-long retreat, and the 6-week follow-up showed a nice reduction in burnout and more positive attitudes towards clients. And since that time, we've done it in a lot of different settings in different places. And our framework is really thinking about this as any other stress-related mental health concern. And that if you help people become more aware of it and identify their own patterns of when they're starting to feel stress at work, then they can learn skills to address it. And we use many of the same approaches we use in mental health with our clients. And we're also interested not just in reducing burnout, but enhancing well-being. And part of that is because we spend so many hours at work. And this is a fun study that was done several years ago through APA, the American Psychological Association. And they had people rate what activities made them the most happy and how much time they spent in each of those. And so you'll see at the top, having sex and socializing tend to make people most happy, but we're not doing that very often. And down at the bottom of the list, working comes in just above commuting as the least happy activity. But if you look over on the right, you'll see that we spend most of our time working. And so trying to think about how can we help people be happier in their work, because we do spend so much of our life in work time. So focal points of our work, a little bit on burnout. That's some people experience that, but everyone experiences work stress. And so these strategies can help with work stress and life stress. And many of the activities that we focus on can be helpful in just general happiness and well-being and getting more meaning in your work, in your life, actually, thinking about a lot of the activities that we do. And we take a functional analysis relapse prevention approach. And so we talk about early warning signs, identifying our signs, what our triggers are. And so for those of you who are working with people with substance abuse concerns, you'll see this language and you're familiar with it. And then we think about, well, what principles do we need to follow to focus on our well-being, and then some specific practices, and working on a personal plan. And so each person will think about what are the principles that you would like to follow, what specific practices work for you, and come up for your own plan. And originally we've done this in a workshop setting. And so when we're in person, it would be a lot of small group discussion and pairs. In this kind of a seminar, it's more, I'll have some reflection for you, but we don't have the same level of interaction we might have in an in-person workshop. So what are our common signs of burnout? Your early warning signs you might think about. And this has a list that comes from the research literature on different signs or symptoms that are associated with burnout. And I'd like you to kind of look over the list and think about your own signs and just take a moment to jot down what are the things that you might struggle with when you start feeling stressed or overworked. You might even have personal signs that aren't on this list. So I know for myself, when I get overwhelmed, I try to focus more on my breathing. And when I walk down the hallway, I might extend my arms up to take a deep breath. And when I notice that I'm doing that more, it's a sign that I'm getting a little stressed at work and I'm kind of doing that breathing. You might also notice patterns, like does one symptom lead to another? And so you might be worried about something at work. And so then you're waking up early, thinking about that thing at work. You're not getting good sleep. Sleep leads you to feel irritable. You might then start to withdraw from your friends or your family. And without that extra support, you're feeling even more overwhelmed. And so if you can notice some of those patterns in your own life, you can start to recognize, sorry, I got the Q&A sign and I thought I should respond, but that's later. When you recognize those patterns, you can start to plan for them. So in my own life, before COVID, when I used to do a lot of traveling, my family would notice I would get a little irritable before a big trip. And I realized it was part of that, we call it now, pre-travel anxiety. And so making sure that I had everything worked out early, had my packing done and all those things could help. And so just even having a name for it and recognizing it made it easier for the whole family when my kids were little to adjust to this. Okay, now I can't, there we go. Okay, so patterns lead us to think about, well, where do those symptoms come from? And sometimes they feel like they come just out of the blue, but usually there's some trigger or something that leads you to start feeling overwhelmed at work. And again, this list comes from research looking at different antecedents or predictors of burnout. And we can group them in different areas. Client factors, so serving people who are perceived as difficult to help, having more work than time. So you might look at these personal triggers and see what are some of yours and maybe write those down. Take a moment to think about. And Stephanie, the poll we did earlier, maybe you could bring that up. We can see again, what are the things that lead people to feel most stressed in our group? So for most of us, having more work than time to do it. Yeah, that is a very common thing. So what do we do about this? Now that we know what our early warning signs are, what are our triggers? Okay, then we can think about, well, how do we think about burnout and well-being? And that's some of our broader principles. And then what can we do about it? And then focus on that specific plan. So some of the principles that we think about, the first one is really important, and that is that Focusing on your wellness is a personal intention that you have to make a choice and a commitment to yourself to focus on that. And that it may not be easy. So, taking the inner path, you might have your own personal reasons that kind of lead you to be susceptible to burnout, and trying to understand for you what might that be. And it's not always an easy path to figure that out. We are also guided by the principle that in mental health, we are here to serve others and not to fix others. And that if you take that responsibility of fixing the problem off, then it's much easier to just serve in the ability that you have and not trying to take that responsibility for fixing. We have to trust in the process. So for those of you who are doing direct care work, and you might not be seeing the positive outcomes of the work that you're doing. And so we have to think of this maybe as planting seeds, and later that seed will grow into something, and you might not see it right away, but you have to trust that what you're doing is having some kind of positive effect. So remembering that is helpful. We also try to be more present oriented. And in the next week's slideshow, we'll talk a little bit more about how we think about our work, but often our thoughts are either in the future, we're planning what are the things we have to get done, or they might be in the past. Oh, I wish I would have done that differently. And so when we can focus being more present oriented, then we can get more of that focus on now. And that is, it tends to slow down time, and it makes you feel less stressed in the moment. And we'll do some of those activities in just a moment. And the last one is giving yourself permission to care for yourself. And when we come to this work because we want to help other people, we're often thinking that it's too selfish to take time, or I don't actually have time to take time for myself because I'm doing all these other things for other people. But if your cup is not full, you can't share it with other people. And I think about when I used to travel a lot in the airplane, they would say when the mask comes down, that you need to put your own mask on first before you help the person next to you, or before you help your child even. And it's that same kind of principle that we need to help ourselves first so that we can be there to serve others. And so what practices do we have to help with this? And we have split these into different components. We start with core contemplative practices that will focus on breathing activities, mindfulness, being in the moment. We have cognitive practices where we think about our work differently and reconnect with our meaning and values. Why did we come to this work in the first place, and trying to get that connection back. We also can focus on physical strategies, getting good sleep, eating well, those kinds of things. Time management approaches, that again will be next week. And building social support and right relationships. So a lot of times stress at work can come from conflict with colleagues or clients. And so there are different practices that we can do. And trying to integrate these into your daily work life. And we think about these practices as kind of like the different menu approach, where you might take something from here and something from there, and it'll work out for you. So we provide practices to think about. You can try them all out, but some may connect more with you than others, or some may be more helpful for you than others. So today we'll do our contemplative practices next. Next session, we'll do a brief refresher practice to start, and then we'll focus on integrating cognitive and time management strategies. And the third session, we'll do another refresher practice and then focus on connecting with coworkers. So our contemplative practices, those are practices that will help directly address the experience of distress. And so if you are feeling stressed in the moment and you start doing some of these practices, they can help you feel better in the moment. But they are also active strategies for focusing on the present, and they can help you feel more gratified in your work as well. And you can also use these to help disengage from work stress and that emotional labor that we're doing. So at the end of the day, when you go home, or if you're not on call, you can be more easily able to disconnect and kind of switch off when you leave work. And the relaxation response, as many of you know, we have physiological effects when we do relaxation exercises. We have a lower heart rate, lower blood pressure. It reduces your muscle tension and slows your breathing. And so all of these things go together to make you feel less stressed in the moment. And when you do them on a regular basis, many people experience emotional and spiritual benefits. And research shows that people who do regular meditation or yoga or daily kinds of relaxation activities do experience increased life purpose and satisfaction. And they also have an increased sense of spirituality and connection with each other and with the universe. So a lot of good benefits. So our first one is really focusing on breathing, and we can call this diaphragmatic breathing or belly breathing. Sometimes people refer to it. And it's the idea that we want to use our diaphragm and our stomach to fully bring the air into our lungs. And you hold it and then release it fully using your stomach muscles to expel the air all the way out of your lungs. Again, if you are in a public place or around a lot of other people, you don't want to be breathing deeply in public with COVID and the virus going around. But if you are at home or you're in an office or in your car parked, you can do some of this deep breathing. And what I'd like us to do, if you could think about, before I do like a guided exercise, for the diaphragmatic breathing, put one hand on your chest, upper chest, and one on your belly. And when you're doing this belly breathing and you breathe in, your hand on your chest should not move, but your hand on your belly will expand out as you breathe in, and it'll go back in as you breathe out. So if you notice that deep breath in, your stomach expands, your chest does not move, and you breathe out all the way out. And some people like to breathe in through their nose, out through their mouth. You can do either one. I breathe in and out through my nose, but when I breathe out, I do that kind of yoga breath that makes that sound at the back of your throat. So you can breathe in and breathe out. So we'll try a guided breathing exercise where I'll kind of talk you through it. But I'd like you to try that belly breathing where you're breathing deeply in slowly. And if you can get into a comfortable position, and you can put your feet on the floor, maybe your palms up in your lap. If you're in a private place and you feel comfortable, you can close your eyes. If not, you can have kind of a soft focus on the screen. And take a deep breath in using your diaphragm to pull it all the way into your lungs. Expand your stomach. Hold it for a second or two, and then breathe all the way out. It may be helpful to gently rest your hand on your stomach and focus on making it rise and lower. Your diaphragm expanding as you breathe in and contracting as you breathe out. Take another deep breath in and breathe out all the way. As you breathe in again, you might notice the sound your breath makes as you inhale. And the sound it makes as you exhale. Breathing in deeply, all the way in and all the way out. You might notice the temperature. What does the air feel like when you breathe in and when you breathe out? Your stomach gently rising and falling. If there are thoughts coming into your head, that's okay. You can notice them and then go back to focusing on your breathing. You might imagine that you're on the bank of a stream. Your thoughts are leaves floating gently down the current. You notice them, but you let them flow by. Then you return to focus on your breathing. So take another deep breath in and out. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes and join us again. So that's a short exercise that you can do just to center yourself and focus, maybe before going to an important meeting or seeing a client. I used to do this in early COVID, getting stressed about going out into public. I would do it in my car before I had to get out and do things. So those are different strategies you might use for timing of a deep breathing exercise. There's also something called box breathing. And that's where you might imagine a four-sided box and you count to 4. And so you might count to 4 as you breathe in, and then you hold your breath for 4, and then you breathe out for 4 and hold your breath for 4. So it's the idea that you're going around a box, for example. And Navy SEALs do this, and a lot of people find this very helpful too. And so I can walk us through that, where if you get back into your comfortable position, and again, close your eyes if you can, or you might imagine a box, and we'll take a deep breath in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, exhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. So you might take another breath or two as you're counting on your own, and then you can join us again. Some people like box breathing better than the other type because then their thoughts don't float around as much. And so when you focus on counting, for some people, that's more helpful. And I put a link up here. There's a lot of different breathing exercises you'll find on the internet, but I thought this was a nice one that describes how to do it. And it has a little like a balloon or circle expanding for 4, and it'll say on the screen, hold, and then the circle goes down. So there are different kinds of visual things you might use too. And a third breathing technique is called alternate nostril breathing. And some of you may be familiar with this. And I kind of joke that you might want to have Kleenex nearby when you're doing this. But this is a different strategy of breathing where you're physically holding one nostril closed as you breathe in, and then you switch and gently hold the other nostril closed as you breathe out. And so for this one, you don't want to necessarily close your eyes. I'm actually not sure if you can see me or just my screen now. So if you can't see me, what you're going to do is just place your hand on one side of your nose and apply gentle pressure. So one nostril is closed, and you're going to breathe in deeply. And then you switch sides and breathe out the other side. Switch sides back and breathe in. And switch sides and breathe out. And then do that one more time on that side. Breathe in. And breathe out. And then for balance, symmetry, you want to close that other side and breathe in. And then breathe out. And do that 3 times. Breathe in. And breathe out. So that one to me feels differently. The temperature is different going into my head as I'm breathing in. And some people like that because it's a physical activity that you're doing. And so if you have trouble with your mind wandering and you don't like the counting, it's a physical movement. And I know Gary had some sinus problems, and he said this activity really helped with his sinuses too. In the first workshop we did, one of our participants in the follow-up said that at first she thought this was just a silly exercise, but then she realized that if she held her nose closed the right way, she could surreptitiously give other people the finger while she was doing her relaxation exercises. So that was kind of interesting for us to learn. But those are just some different breathing exercises. They help you focus on the moment. They help you slow down. Your body gets in that relaxation response. And they're things that you can do throughout the day. So they're nice little activities. There's some other contemplative practices that if we were in person doing a workshop, we might do a raisin mindfulness exercise where you go through and taste a raisin in a certain way. And different kinds of activities like meditation, yoga, prayer. So if you are a religious person, those practices are very contemplative as well. And this website has a cool little tree that has lots of different contemplative practices that all can bring more meaning to you and also help with relaxation. And so if you're a person who's creative, you might think about journaling or using your art. I do a lot of knitting, and I find that very meditative when I'm working with yarn. People who are more active, you might do walking meditations or yoga or dance. So there are a lot of different things you can think about that can help you focus on the moment and be more present. So our next session together, we'll start off with another contemplative exercise and focus on managing our workload. But before we wind up, I would like everyone to think about what's one thing you want to take away from today, something you might incorporate into your life for the next week. And I'd like you to write it down. And as our work in mental health, we know a lot about goal setting with clients, and good goals are SMART goals. So we want to be specific, measurable, something achievable, relevant to you, and timely. So it might be doing a deep breathing exercise every morning as you start your computer or before you see a client. Something like that. But just take a moment, write down one action step you'd like to take away. Okay, and now we can go to questions and answer time. Stephanie, should I stop sharing screen at this point?
Hey, Dr. Stallers, this is Emily. I'll go ahead and share mine.
Okay.
If that's okay.
Yeah.
And we'll just go on to these questions here. So we'd like to thank you so much, everyone. We've reached the Q&A portion of today's webinar. Please feel free to submit your questions by typing them into that Q&A feature you see on your screen. I see that we already have several in the queue. The first question, I think, is for us, and it's, will we receive these slides later? Yes, these slides will be available for download on our website, and we'll also have the recording of the entire webinar on our website for review later. That should be up on our website in the next 2 to 3 business days. Our next question, which is for you, Dr. Salyers, is what is facing the shadows all about? What's that facing the shadows idea about?
Yeah, that is sometimes when we're working on our own well-being and trying to reduce our burnout, we have to look inside ourselves to see, why is this work stressor really getting to me personally? And sometimes it may be related to something that has happened to you in the past. It might be kind of like too close to home. It might be grief related. So a colleague of mine had lost a client several years prior, and thinking about how work was interfering with his well-being at the time, he realized he was making those connections back to losing that particular client, and that was a difficult journey for him. And so he referred to it as kind of facing the shadows. So that's what I mean by that.
Thanks so much. Our next question is, what if the agency operates in a manic manner? So what if the agency that someone is working for operates in a manic manner?
Yeah, well, that is difficult. So through our work with Breathe, a lot of people like the idea of like focusing on themselves and giving permission. That's a big part of it, and sharing that time together. But you go back to your agency, and if they are operating in a way that is not conducive to your well-being, then there's kind of a mismatch. And so we have been trying to work on more organizational change strategies that we can work with managers to think more about how do they want to operate, how do they want to work in a way that could enhance well-being. So if you are a manager yourself and can make some of those changes, or you have the ability to use your voice with managers, you can help them to start thinking about, are there different ways we could work smarter or better so that we're not frenetically running around. And sometimes even taking a moment at the beginning and the end of the day to come together and share. So when I start meetings, I start them with an appreciative check-in. I do this with my classes. I do this when I was running faculty meetings. And each person goes around and does like something you feel grateful for today, or something that you do to relax outside of work. And it takes a little bit of time, but it helps people feel connected to each other. It starts the day or the meeting or something in a positive way. And so that's a small approach that you could start bringing in more organizational changes. But it is difficult when the organization isn't in line with this slowing down, focusing, mindfulness approach. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Our next question is, please repeat the wonderful description on why focusing on the present is so important.
Yeah. Well, that we do spend so much time elsewhere with our minds, that some people are planners and they're always in the future, and some people are maybe perseverate on things that have happened and wish they could have done it differently. And when you focus on the moment, the present, that really is the only time that we are actually living and being, is in that present moment. And so when you focus on the present moment, time really does slow down. You don't feel as stressed. You don't feel as pressured. And so this is coming into more of the general conversation that we hear. Mindfulness is all around. And I think it is because it really works when you can focus on the present.
Thank you. Our next question is, do you have a recommendation for a meditation or deep breathing app?
Well, that is a good question. I don't, because I have these exercises that I've done, and so I kind of do them myself. But I know that there are good ones out there. Maybe in the chat, if people have found one that they use and recommend, that would be good. Oh yeah, Calm, Headspace. I've seen a lot of people use those. Yeah, there are so many apps. I think technology, and we'll talk about this next week, it adds stress to our lives in many ways, but it can also provide a lot of good resources and things too. So yeah, thank you guys for sharing your insights for those too.
Yes, thank you. Our next question is for us at the Southeast MHTTC, and it's, will we be given certificates for attending, and will they count as CEUs? So I will talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but yes, a certificate of attendance is available for people that fill out our Stamp to Require evaluation survey. I'll talk about that in just a minute, but no, they do not count as official CEUs. Our next question is, where can we find more about the SMART process?
Oh, SMART goals. People use different acronyms, or the same acronym but different words. So it's a common goal setting strategy. I don't have a link right now, but I can certainly find one and give it to you, Emily. Are there other questions for?
Yeah, while you look for that, the last question that we have in the queue is, what does BREATHE stand for again?
Okay, burnout reduction, increased awareness, tools, handouts, and education. So that it really is too much of a mouthful, but we thought BREATHE itself was a really nice way to get us to focus on that core element, really, because breathing is such an important aspect of what we do. We do it all day long, but when you can focus on it like that, it's better. Okay. All right, here's a SMART Goals link on Mind Tools. So I can put that in the chat. Panelists and attendees. But there's more when we talk about goal setting. Yeah, I think that could be a good link. That'll just tell you some of the basics about it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that link. And thank you again for this lovely presentation and for answering all of our questions. I think that that's about all the time that we have for the Q&A portion. So do you have any closing remarks or comments that you would like to share until our next module, which is next week at the same time?
Oh, well, just thank you for your attention and joining us today. This is always fun for me to do. I love to reconnect to people who are out in the field. I miss seeing your faces and actually talking with you, but this is good for now. So I'm happy that we're doing this and looking forward to next week. We'll talk about managing our workload.
All right. Thank you so much again, Dr. Salyers. We're looking forward to next week as well. And we are going to move on to our evaluation portion of today's event. So the Southeast MHTTC would like to thank you for your participation in today's event. We value your feedback and invite you to evaluate us today. Please complete a brief SAMHSA required survey by visiting the link presented on your screen. Completion of this survey will provide information to SAMHSA and assist us in planning future events. Afterwards, you will be automatically redirected to additional questions from the Southeast MHTTC regarding the impact of this event on your knowledge and skills. There you will have the opportunity to download a certificate of attendance for your records. Please allow 5 to 10 seconds for your browser to redirect you. Again, our center appreciates your participation and feedback. We appreciate you, Dr. Salyers, for this wonderful presentation, and we look forward to next week. Thanks so much, and that concludes today's webinar event.